Okay, we're doing the quotes from Dr. Mcdougall. These quotes come from this book, John Mcdougall, The Doctor Who Fought for You, written by me, Pete Rogers. Okay, this is part 7 of the Dr. Mcdougall quotes here. The first one is, he has a friend. He was friends with Dr. Heimlich, the guy who invented the Heimlich maneuver. And what Dr. Mcdougall says, the Heimlich maneuver is like when you give somebody, you come up from behind them and you give them a hug, and you're clamping your hands around their upper abdomen, right beneath the xiphoid is where your fists lock together, and you pull upward, and it's to pop the air out of their trachea, like if a piece of food was stuck in their trachea. So that's called the Heimlich maneuver, and that's in comparison with what he says is the Red Cross maneuver of giving somebody back slaps. And so what Heimlich and Mcdougall say is the back slaps are stupid. They say they don't work. They can even get the foreign body, let's say, from in your trachea to go down lower. So they say if you accidentally inhale a piece of food into your trachea, they said the best thing to do is the Heimlich maneuver. Okay. And he says that Dr. Heimlich saved more people's lives than anybody else in an acute setting with this Heimlich maneuver. A really smart guy is a surgeon. He also invented the Heimlich valve for, when you're not in a hospital setting to drain pneumothorax. Okay. But they made a big point about the Heimlich maneuver is good and the backslaps are bad, in their opinion. Okay, they also said if a person is drowning, the first thing you got to do is get the water out of the lungs. So by pushing on the abdomen right beneath the xiphoid where the ribs come together at the bottom there, the rib cage, they said you can clear the water out of the lungs, and you need to do that before you can oxygenate the lungs. They said if you don't get the water out of the lungs, how are you going to oxygenate the lungs? You don't get the water out of the airways. Okay, and there's a video about that. If you just type in Heimlich with Dr. Mcdougall, you'll see the video where they actually demonstrate how they do the Heimlich maneuver and whatnot. Same thing here. For near-drowning patients, you got to get the water out of the lungs first. Okay, next thing Mcdougall says is it's better to be hated than ignored when change is the goal. Okay, next quote. To reduce healthcare costs, all doctors and dietitians should be required to teach a starch-based diet. Yeah, that's 100% right. I can tell you, it's amazing how ridiculously stupid and ignorant the medical system is about diet. And I actually think it's intentional, because if they actually taught people a starch-based diet, they would hardly ever need the medical system. Okay, but if you look at obesity conferences, I've gone to some, they'll sit there and they'll go on and on about the Mediterranean diet, and it's totally stupid. Lots of doctors will recommend the Mediterranean diet. There's also a lot of people, they're just sort of mentally wimpy, and they get bullied into thinking that olive oil is good for them. And it comes because the industry research is just pushed and pushed and pushed. Industry can quickly do 5 studies and say, look, the weight of the evidence. We got 5 studies that show that olive oil is good for you, and we only have 2 that say it's bad for you in this context, whatever that might be. So industry can always load the deck, if you will, and claim they've got more studies supporting the product. That's why you have to ignore industry studies, because they're just advertisements. I often see that. To me, that's a sign of somebody who's either weak or dishonest when they're easily swayed by industry studies. They're, a lot of times they're usually lazy and they just haven't studied it. But okay, and then sometimes they're dishonest. If you hear a smart old doctor who really knows nutrition telling you that olive oil is good for you, they're BSing you. Let's see. Oh, but the reason I tell you this too is I recently read some papers and books by these psychiatrists who claim to be nutritional psychiatrists. And the stuff they're saying is totally stupid. Some of them are recommending the ketogenic diet because that has some unique things about it. And I can see that for slowing the brain down. It's sometimes used to treat refractory epilepsy. But in real life, I want my brain to be smart. I want it to be fast. I don't want to unnaturally slow it down and make myself sick with the ketogenic diet. And then there's other psychiatrists, including ones from Ivy League school. I'm not going to say their name, but they're pretty well known and they've written some books that are saying stuff that to me is just totally stupid. They're recommending olive oil off the charts. They're recommending Mediterranean diet, including meat and wine and canola oil. They're just stupid. It's completely wrong. They don't have a rational basis for what they're saying. And I think what they may be saying is, gee, you can make the Mediterranean diet look good if you compare it to the SAD diet, the standard American diet, but that doesn't mean it's a good diet. Just because it's not as bad as a terrible diet like the standard American diet doesn't mean it's a good diet. The whole food, vegan, starch-based, low-fat, low-protein, that's the best diet with no oils. Okay, next quote from Dr. Mcdougall. He says that baby formula should be by prescription only. Oh, and then, actually, this next statement is from me. Forcing moms to go back to work after only 3 months is bad for the kid's brain. They should allow mothers to have more time off for maternity leave and take more time to breastfeed the kid. They should be breastfeeding the kid at least 6 months. It'd be better to go longer. That'll help increase the kid's IQ, and protect them from, the baby formula, in an aluminum can with BPA lining. They're both neurotoxic, those things. Perhaps with soy processed with hexane and sweetened with high fructose corn syrup. It's all that neurotoxic stuff if it's got, HG contamination. Okay, next thing. Dr. Mcdougall says all oral diabetic medications should be outlawed. They lead to more people dying than benefiting. Let's see, the next thing he says, hypertension should only be treated with medications after it has been sustained for months at 160/100 millimeters or higher. I've actually heard him one time say 150. And then here's another thing he says, well, first of all, he says the best medication for hypertension is the diuretic chlorthalidone. And that's about the only medicine he uses to treat hypertension in the lectures I've heard him give. The next thing he says is blood pressure should be lowered to no less than 140/90, because a lot of patients think the lower the better. That is not true. The reason you have a blood pressure is to get blood to the top of your brain, to pump against gravity. So you need to get blood to the top of your brain. That's why it's elevated in the first place. But you don't want to lower it too much, or you might not be getting adequate blood to the top of your brain, and you might be making your brain cells ischemic, being deprived of the adequate amount of oxygen and glucose delivery, and that can put them at risk for apoptosis, programmed cell death, due to a lack of oxygen and glucose delivery, not enough ability to make ATP, energy, to meet the metabolic demands of the cell. So you don't want to overtreat hypertension. Okay, that can also lead you to be lightheaded, to having syncope, to passing out, which can be dangerous if you're operating machinery, moving around, riding a bike, or driving a car or something. That could be bad. Let's see. The best thing to do is just stop eating the high-fat foods, because they stick the red blood cells together in general, causing blood sludge, raising your pressure, because you have to pump at a higher pressure to pump thick blood, like a milkshake to the top of your head, compared to pumping normal blood, which is like water. Okay, that requires less pressure. You want to minimize dietary sodium because it's a vasoconstrictor. And when it vasoconstricts, it clamps down on the diameter of the blood vessels going to your brain, so you need to pump higher pressure to pump through a constricted system. Okay, and uric acid is also an inhibitor of endothelial nitric acid, and that comes from eating meats. It also comes from eating a lot of high fructose corn syrup. So you don't want to eat any processed food. Okay, next thing from Dr. Mcdougall. The best way to determine water intake is to go by thirst. Okay, and that's really a contradiction to the common, advertising statement of, everybody should drink 8 cups of water a day, which is totally stupid, because obviously an 80-pound woman doesn't need the same amount of water as a 350-pound lineman. And it's obviously the case also because if you're drinking tap water, which is full of F-, estrogenic chemicals, PCBs, aluminum, all this crap, then the more you drink of it, the worse. Okay, and my video yesterday, I wonder if you saw that one. I made it about Fiji water. What an interesting thing that was. Everybody's going around saying Fiji and all these other waters are the best ones to protect your brain because they contain silica, which chelates aluminum to get aluminum out of your body and thus protect your brain from that neurotoxin. And then the paradox was Fiji in particular, it comes from water that rinses over volcanic rock. Well, guess what? Volcanic rock is high in F-. F- is a neurotoxin. So you're robbing Peter to pay Paul. Damned if you do, damned if you don't. It's not good. So I thought that was funny. So the bottom line is Fiji water is high in F-, so I would not drink it. Okay, next thing. He says they try to block me, meaning that he's not popular in the conventional world or the advertising world, the big corporate world, because he tells the pros how to help themselves rather than to buy products. Okay, next thing Dr. Mcdougall says, aluminum spray deodorants are worse than roll-ons because people, when you spray it, you inhale some of that and it goes right through the olfactory nerve, straight back to your brain. There's some evolutionary biologists who believe the brain developed in large part by building upon the olfactory cortex. The olfactory cortex is unique in the sense that you can associate a smell to anything. So it's not so fixed in its signal interpretation as like touch. You can touch something. Is it hot? Is it cold? Is it here or there? But that's a limited thing versus with olfactory. You can associate anything to anything, anything to anything. So that's perfect for building more of a brain upon that can associate anything it wants to remember. Okay, so anyways, the point is olfactory cortex goes right to your nose. That's the nerve of smell, right back to your brain, right to the region of the hippocampus and other important centers in your brain. You don't want to damage those. So if you're spraying a spray like a deodorant, you inhale some of that. Bad. Much better to roll it on. And also stupid to be spraying other toxic things on your kid or yourself, like sunscreen, like mosquito repellent, any of this crap, okay? You're going to inhale some of it, olfactory nerve towards your brain. Not smart. Okay, next thing Dr. Mcdougall says. By the way, he's a big proponent. He read all the papers, lots of papers, about aluminum being toxic to the brain. And it is toxic to the brain. But this is one of the rare situations where I would differ from a little. I've studied the brain a lot more than he has. And there's a lot of things besides aluminum. Yes, aluminum is a major neurotoxin. But there's a whole bunch of other things that are major neurotoxins too. Okay, the next one is you can only live on potatoes. You can live on only potatoes and vitamin B12. Because potatoes are a tuber, they grow in the ground, they absorb all the nutrients from the ground. They have just about every single nutrient you could want. And he showed studies of people who've survived on pretty much potatoes alone for months on end and came out of it feeling pretty good. The only thing you're still going to need to supplement is vitamin B12. B12 comes from bacteria, but it just is higher in animal tissues if you eat meat than it is in plants. And he says that's the only legitimate criticism of the vegan diet is that it's low in B12. Other quotes he makes, Dr. Mcdougall, about potatoes are, potato has the highest yield per acre of any starch. Potatoes are the working man's food. Potatoes were the food of Ireland. All the poor people in Ireland, they'd have a small little acre lot and they would grow enough potatoes to feed themselves and their families, other than the potato blight in the mid-1840s. McDougall said in order for the world's population to survive, we're going to have to be eating a lot of potatoes and a lot of rice. Potatoes are cheap. Potatoes make people healthy. Potatoes are easy to cook. You just boil them. Dr. McDougall has a very nice lecture on potatoes called the Potato Mastermind Lecture, parts 1 and 2. Okay. Also, he's an Irish doctor, so it's kind of a nice thing for an Irish doctor to sit there. He's Scots-Irish to be able to tell the public, look, the potatoes could save you. That's kind of an ironic thing for an Irish doctor to be saying. Okay, potatoes make people healthy. The potato pulp is about the same nutrition as the potato skin. And some people like to eat the potato skin, some don't. Okay, the claim that our ancestors needed meat to develop a big brain is not true. McDougall believes that we were eating starch from as soon as we, came onto the planet. Other people think we ate fruit mostly initially, and that's why we have color vision to see when fruit is ripe. But he studied it a lot. He has spent a lot of time studying it, and he's got a lot of lectures on that. And he spent a lot of time working and talking with anthropologists about the original human diet. And he came to the conclusion that it began with starch. Okay, next thing Dr. McDougall says, if we eat natural plant foods, we will always, during all stages of life, get enough omega-3 fats. Yes, there's plenty of omega-3 fats in low-fat plant foods. You don't need to seek out any sort of supplement. Okay, so anyways, that's part 7 of Dr. McDougall quotes. Hope that was helpful.